Bella, if you don't help your family, who will you help? I hadn't even taken off my thick coat from the cold Thanksgiving wind when my mother let out that sentence like a verdict. The living room smelled of roasted turkey and cinnamon, the fireplace warming the tense atmosphere somewhat, until my younger sister, Jessica, stood up, holding a glass of red wine and smiling brightly as if she were about to share good news with the family. But no, my sister here. She has a jewelry company worth over $20 million, Jessica said, as if introducing a Hollywood star who just appeared in Forbes. And yet, since she became successful, she hasn't bought anything for our parents. Not a single vacation, not a house, not a dime for their retirement. The room fell silent for a beat. Then my mother slammed her fork down on the table and said, "I gave birth to you, and now it's time for you to give back." My father nodded, adding, "You need to think about your family. Stop living so selfishly." I stood there. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. But inside, the way they looked at me, not as a loved one, but as an ATM, made me feel colder than the wind outside. I wasn't surprised that Jessica had spoken up. She always loved showing off, but I felt choked seeing the people who should have known me best be the most eager. When it came to money, I had never felt so estranged from my family as I did in that moment. Not because I was rich, but because I knew, from that moment on, I was just a number in their eyes. When Jessica was born, I felt like a part of me was erased. I was no longer the only daughter in the family's eyes, and gradually, I realized I wasn't the center of attention anymore. They poured all their care and love into Jessica, the perfect, beautiful, charming baby. She always knew how to draw attention with her bright smile, sparkling eyes, and approachable personality. Even from my earliest years, I felt the difference, always being compared to her. No matter how hard I tried to excel, no matter what outstanding achievements I earned, my parents' attention was always on Jessica, the sister who always stood out in everyone's eyes. Looking back, I know I wasn't a bad kid. I was a diligent daughter, always striving for great academic achievements, disciplined and independent. But in my family's eyes, I was just a faint shadow of Jessica, who lit up the room every time she appeared. She had a special gift I couldn't deny: charm. She didn't need to try hard, just a radiant smile and a witty way of talking, and all eyes were on her. My mother always said that Jessica has a special talent. You see, she always draws people in. Meanwhile, I, despite excelling in school and always earning top grades, never received such praise. Not because I didn't deserve it, but because my parents had reserved all their pride for Jessica. In those moments, I didn't blame them. At first, I thought it might just be unconscious favoritism, something anyone in a family could fall into without realizing. But as I grew older, I began to see it wasn't accidental. It was a pattern established since I was young. From family dinners to important gatherings, Jessica was always the centerpiece, while I was the one on the sidelines, fading into the background. She could make everyone laugh effortlessly, while I sat quietly, watching conversations unfold without being able to join in. Once, my mother told me, not to encourage, but as a casual remark, "You need to learn to shine like Jessica. She has something you don't." I stayed silent, but those words cut into me like a sharp knife. They hurt more than any scolding because I wasn't a bad daughter, yet I always felt I was never good enough, never valuable enough in their eyes. That's when I began to understand that if I didn't find a way to step out of Jessica's shadow, I'd be trapped in it forever. So, at 18, when everything was still raw and unpolished, I decided to leave home. No dramatic farewell, no grand promises, just quietly, I did it. I didn't need to make a scene to prove I could stand on my own. I just needed to act. I didn't tell anyone about my decision. My family had no idea I'd started working side jobs to support myself, no longer wanting to depend on anyone. I worked at coffee shops, studied from worn-out books I found at secondhand bookstores, and gradually saved enough to live independently. I built my life, carving my own path without anyone's help. The reason I didn't need help was simple. I didn't want to owe anyone, and I didn't want to live off anyone's pity. At 24, I decided to start my own business. I had no support from my family, no solid foundation to lean on. All I had was a burning dream, to create a high-end jewelry appraisal company serving VIP clients. It was an ambitious dream, but I believed that with persistence, I could make it real. I started with a small workshop, just me and a few employees, but we worked tirelessly day after day to turn ideas into valuable products. Everything was tough. I didn't have significant capital or pre-existing connections to help me move faster. I learned everything from scratch. I taught myself how to build a brand, find clients, and develop industry relationships. Every step was grueling, but I didn't give up. I stayed up late, working until dawn, just to finalize contracts and marketing strategies for my company. After each exhausting effort, I felt like I was on the right path. For the first time in my life, I felt proud of what I created. I was no longer the little girl living in her sister's shadow. I wasn't the one quietly standing behind other successes. My company, John Expeditions, started gaining attention from important clients. The unique jewelry, the intricate necklaces we crafted, didn't just attract those who loved luxury, they became symbols of prestige. Gradually, my company rose, its value surpassing $20 million, a number I never dared to dream of. Now, I no longer needed my family's recognition. They could call me wayward, the one living in Jessica's shadow, but I didn't need to explain anymore. I had walked my own path, found my true worth, not through family praise, but through what I built. I was no longer tormented by not being loved or recognized like Jessica. I found my own light, built my own success, without relying on anyone. Perhaps at that moment, I realized we don't always need validation from loved ones. True success isn't about proving your worth to others, it's about finding your own value, even if it means walking a long, lonely road. No need to explain or seek approval from anyone else. Success is a journey you feel and take pride in yourself. And when you've done that, external words no longer matter. Everything came so suddenly. When I realized my family's demands, I couldn't help but feel bewildered. How could this be? My family wasn't struggling. Did they really expect me to hand over what I worked so hard to earn? Yes, I had $20 million, but I'd built it step by step, with countless hours of labor, sacrifice, and determination. I never intended to support the entire family, but they thought it was my duty. A sense of frustration and loss began to envelop me. Why didn't they see my efforts? Why did they treat me like an emotionless ATM? Every time I started to feel resentful, I heard my parents' words. Family comes first. How can you keep living just for yourself? Everyone in the extended family knows now. Don't bring shame on us. Those words were like a knife slicing into my heart. They didn't ask if I was okay, didn't ask if I needed help. They only wanted me to help them. That was it. Then there was Jessica. The sister always praised as the successful girl, even if only in a small field the family adored and encouraged. But she never stopped using words to make me feel guilty. If you don't help, you're so selfish. Those words echoed in my mind, making me feel like a villain, as if I were the only one in the family who didn't know how to love or share. And that confused me even more. I hadn't asked anything of them, so why did they think I had to do everything for them? I felt cornered. From a quiet girl who silently endured every pressure, I suddenly realized something crucial. I wasn't the family's emotionless wallet. I wasn't the only one with responsibilities. And I didn't owe them anything. One morning, when everything seemed to weigh me down, I decided things had to change. No shouting, no arguing. I just said one calm, resolute sentence without yielding. I don't owe anyone anything, and I choose to live for myself. At that moment, everyone's eyes seemed to freeze, no one daring to say another word. My mother looked at me, her face sad, as if she couldn't believe. But I knew I'd spoken the truth. And more importantly, I'd begun to understand that living for myself wasn't selfish. It was my right, my respect for myself. In doing so, I didn't just cut off unreasonable demands. I reclaimed control of my life. It wasn't easy, but I started daring to face the truth. No one has the right to demand I live for them when I'd never had the chance to live for myself. That moment felt like my entire world collapsed. The real turning point wasn't when I sat down to write the cold words in that letter. It was the moment I realized I was no longer chasing their demands, no longer trying to please them. I chose to stand up for myself. even knowing it would cost me what I once thought was important. I'll never forget the feeling of pressing send on that letter. It wasn't just a letter, it was my declaration. I knew they wouldn't understand immediately, but I no longer had the strength to explain. I'd spent my whole life pleasing others, making them happy, and I was exhausted. The letter's content was simple but carried a fire of resolve I never thought I'd find within myself. Love can't be bought, and I won't buy family with money. I didn't want to write a cold letter, but after everything, I knew there was no other way to make my family understand I'd reached my limit. The years I'd spent, asking for nothing but a bit of recognition, had become a burden. My mother didn't receive the letter right away, but when I told her I could no longer financially support the family as before, her reaction shocked me. She cried, each tear seeming to express all the sadness, disappointment, and hurt she felt. She said I didn't love her, that I was the most selfish person in the family. I didn't say anything more. I just stood there, unwavering, looking at my mother and feeling an immense sadness welling up inside me. But I couldn't go back. I couldn't keep living for anyone but myself anymore. My father, who I thought might understand, was furious. He wasn't an emotional man, but when he heard I was refusing to provide financial support, he started criticizing me for lacking foresight. He said I was ruining everything we'd built, that I was losing the family over a few bad decisions. Jessica, the sister I always felt out of place and pressured by, stayed silent. She didn't say a word. Not only did she not defend me, she didn't even look at me. She probably thought I wouldn't be strong enough to stand firm, that I'd come back and keep providing for her and the family. But I didn't come back. When I saw Jessica's silence, I realized something. This entire family saw me as a tool. Nothing more, nothing less. But I was no longer a tool. And I didn't need to prove my worth to anyone. Everything changed. When I let go, it wasn't because I didn't love them, but because I loved myself enough to know not everyone deserves a place in my life. You don't always have to be the one who sacrifices last. Sometimes, you need to put yourself first to be the one loved and cared for. And I don't regret that decision. After cutting off all ties with my family, I felt like I'd shed an enormous burden. The relief came from no longer worrying, arguing, or sacrificing my precious self to please others. I didn't hate them, though at times I still felt regret for what was lost, for missed opportunities. But I didn't go back. Why return when I could no longer recognize myself in those days? I began my new days in peace. I no longer had to live with the pressures or unreasonable demands from my family. I rediscovered myself through my work, through quiet moments when no one demanded I be anything or anyone. I spent time growing my company, focusing on the values I'd always believed in and upheld. What I did was mine, not for anyone else, but for me. I was proud of my achievements, not because of anyone's recognition, but because I'd worked hard and lived true to myself. And then I realized something crucial. Not every family member deserves to stay in your life forever. They may be your closest loved ones, but if they don't respect you and constantly bring negativity, keeping them close only makes you lose yourself. Love isn't unconditional sacrifice. Love must be built on respect and understanding, not greed or exploitation. For me, the biggest lesson I learned was not to let anyone, family or friends, override my self-respect. I have the right to live my life with my own choices. When my family looked at me with demanding, disrespectful eyes, I understood that letting go wasn't failure. It was a vital step to reclaiming my freedom and inner peace. To love others, you must first learn to love yourself. And sometimes, loving yourself means knowing when to walk away, when to cut off toxic, unnecessary relationships. Only then can you build a truly happy and free life. Have you ever been demanded of because of your success? Do you believe that sometimes walking away from family is the way to love yourself? Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe personal worth is more valuable than any demands.